Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 499 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and we have heard some pretty big developments today in the southern front as the Ukrainians have managed to outflank a Russian unit and force them most likely to be withdrawing from a village as we speak right now. It is actually a pretty large land gain, and we will be going into that here in just a little bit. But before we get into that, just a quick update. Matthew is feeling better. He is, I believe.
Yes, yes.
And so he is getting better. Interestingly enough, I'm not actually feeling that bad. Whatever happened last night, I went to sleep and I woke up and I feel fine, so I'm good. But Matthew is still on the up and up right now, and hopefully he'll be better because we are planning on continuing on our normal schedule right now, but that's still a little up in the air because if Matthew does begin to regress and feel worse, we may end up having to cut another stream. But the plan is to keep these things running as normal and run our normal Saturday and Sunday streams, and then, of course, go back into a normal streaming week. But without further ado, and getting out of the sickness update, and it's great to hear that Matthew is getting better, and it's great to know he's getting better because I live here. I'm not just hearing about it, I'm seeing it. We're now going to be moving on into some of our big news for the day, beginning north of Kyiv, where I put these two markers down. The announcement was made today by the United States government that we will be providing cluster munitions to Ukraine. And the Washington Post reported on this. According to their statement, the President of the United States has approved the provision of cluster munitions for Ukraine, with drawdown of the weapons from the Department of Defense stocks due to be announced this Friday. The principal weapon under consideration, an M864 artillery shell, is fired from 155mm howitzers the United States and other Western countries have provided Ukraine. And to go and look at this specific artillery shell, here it is. We're not going to be going to the Wikipedia article. We're actually going to be going to Bullet Picker because I believe they may have a better example here of what this is. You can see what this cluster munition looks like right here. And it appears that this illustration is without the fuse because we can see that that's where the fuse would go. It's not in there. The M864 projectile is used to deliver dual-purpose armor-defeating and anti-personnel grenades at ranges beyond the capabilities of the M843A1 projectile, or when the M483A1 is not available. The projectile, 155mm HE M864, is of the separate loading type. The fuse, propelling charge, and primer are handled and loaded separately. The projectile contains a total of 72 dual-purpose grenades, 48 each M42 and 24 each M46s. A base burner assembly containing 2.6 pounds of propellant is assembled to the base of the projectile body. The propellant is ignited by the propelling charge when the weapon is fired. That means it's the powder charge. You shove that thing in there and let this thing rip, and then the shell goes flying off. The projectile is assembled with a universal lifting plug, which is replaced by an MT, SQ, or ET fuse prior to loading the projectile in the weapon. And so from what we're seeing here, this is not only going to be good for anti-infantry purposes, this also has bomblets, small bomblets inside of it, or dual-purpose grenades, that can knock out tanks as well. And I'm assuming, considering that it would be exploding above the tanks, that it can wipe out practically any tank that the Russians have, whether it be a T-90M, a T-72, a T-80, it will be able to knock out all of them, at least from what we're seeing right here and how it was explained. We'll be waiting to see how this thing operates in combat, and we're not really sure if this is the only cluster munition that is being provided, but at the moment, this is the only one we know about. As soon as this was made as a statement, the Russian ambassador to Belarus then came out and made a statement on top of that, saying that this was a quote-unquote act of desperation. And let me read y'all exactly what this ambassador said, because I thought it was funny. And also, oh man, you don't want to get schleek by lightning, but anyways, the United States' intention to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine is a quote-unquote move of desperation, as Kyiv's counteroffensive did not go according to plan. This was from Russia's ambassador to Belarus, Boris Gryzlov. Now, you know, what I find interesting, I said this during the news summary today as well, what I find really interesting is that the Russians having a coup and, you know, and then having to use hypersonic missiles, at least supposed hypersonic missiles, for some reason that isn't an act of desperation by the Russians, but the Ukrainians getting more and different kinds of weapons from the West is apparently now a sign of desperation because things are going poorly. And I find that to be pretty ridiculous. And speaking of which, if I've ever seen a group of people or a nation that has been in the throes of desperation, it is certainly the Russian army at this point and the Russian government. No other country in the world in the modern day is in that bad of a state that is considered a first or a second world country. Not a single one of them. And they are in the throes of death at this point. We'll be going into how bad off their army is here in a minute, but things are not looking good for the Russians. Things are in fact looking worse for them now than they ever really have. But moving on out of the cluster munition news, which was amazing, and moving on into our location unknowns, we have a pretty decent amount of them tonight. Starting off with our first one, showing these brand new drones called Penguins that are being sent to Ukraine. And so really quickly, let me get this up here on screen. Now I am hoping that this music is not copyright. I'm actually going to turn that down for a second and just let that play. Have you ever wanted to get yourself a high quality drone? Well then, look no further. Introducing the all new Penguin, coming in a Pelican case. Now we're going to mute that because I honestly feel like that's probably copyrighted. And we can see them getting ready to set up the Penguin drone. And it only requires a 2-person crew. We can see them getting out the catapult here and the Penguin as well, setting up the catapult and putting together the Penguin. The Penguin appears to require very little assembly. It appears that you can mount the wings onto it, just screw them on, and the rest of the drone's body is already set up and ready to go. We now see the catapult launching it, and it taking flight. And what this is it's an advanced form of recon drone. It has a high-quality camera. You can see right there that it just zoomed in and saw exactly what was out there at 10 kilometers away. Look how good that zoom is at 10 kilometers. You don't see that kind of quality. 10 kilometers, by the way, is about 7 miles approximate. And when it zooms out, you can see how much of a fidelity this camera has. Now, this can provide a lot of benefits to Ukrainian forces because now they can look well behind the lines without having to send a drone out there, a smaller one, that may potentially be spotted by Russian ground forces and shot down. We can also see that it can acquire targets and the camera will track them. We can also see that it has thermals as well.
Man, I wonder what kind of camera the thing has on to be that clear.
Man, that thing's got that IMAX 4K Ultra HD camera.
Yeah. Damn, 7,000 flight hours.
Man, and it's got... Man, this thing is actually pretty kitted. And we can see them loading it right back into the van, the Squid Game van. And then they're on their way. And it has a 100-kilometer range, which is about 70 miles. Now, that is impressive. I'm not going to lie. That was a pretty impressive drone right there. And from what we're being told, these are made in the United States, and the Ukrainians are buying them from the producer. And so we're going to be seeing these things popping up more and more often and more frequently in Ukraine, and it may be giving them a one-up advantage over the Russians as far as reconnaissance and frontline intelligence goes. They'll have a lot better of an idea now with that drone than they would have had with other kinds of simpler drones. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, where we can also see that a Russian 2S1 SPG was destroyed in an unknown area of the front line today. And also we're going to have to be muting that. So we can see the 2S1 right down there in the tree line, and we can see the drone dropping the bomblets. And it appears that that one was a little off the mark, landed just off to the side of the 2S1. Second time is the charm. And we can now see the SPG going up into a mushroom cloud. Once again, love to see it. We now see them hitting it again. And causing a bit of an explosion. That SPG is gone. And we now see it roasting. And as it continues to burn, the heat is getting hot enough that it's actually warping the metal that the SPG is made out of. And if there is still any of it left, it'll make sure that it is completely unusable. We now see the drone flying off. Continuing to watch the pillar of smoke from the burning SPG. And that is the end of the clip. Now, some of y'all may be wondering, why in the world am I about to move out of the location unknowns and elsewhere? Well, that's because these two videos kind of have a little bit to play into the entire frontline situation and what is in the title and thumbnail tonight. As you can see, Ukrainian intelligence is getting better and better, and as we're also being able to see, because of that, the Ukrainians are once again able to effectively strike and destroy Russian targets a little bit better than they have been. And the reason why their recon is getting better is because they're getting more support, and that is allowing them a little bit of sight behind the lines that they haven't had before. And based off of this intelligence, the Ukrainians are coming up with some ideas and statements that are also being backed up by Western sources that are showing that the Russians are in a pretty bad state. If anything can be described as their frontline condition, they are in the throes of collapse at the moment and will most likely not last for too much longer, maybe several months at the worst, and maybe a half year to a year at the best. But moving on into the Bakhmut area real quick. From what we've seen, based off of Ukrainian recon and what the Ukrainians have been able to gather in this part of the front line, Russian forces are trapped in Bakhmut. And interestingly enough, y'all are looking at this front line right now, y'all are going, wait a minute, the city hasn't been surrounded, so how in the world are they trapped there? Well, that's the interesting thing, and that's what requires a little bit of explanation. And of course, Ukrainian forces say the Russians have been trapped. That's what that says. I had to show that to y'all so that y'all saw where that came from. But here is the reason why. Accompanying yesterday's news with the British Ministry of Defense report, the British Ministry of Defense went through a pretty decent analysis of the combined arms armies that Russia has, where they were, and where they are in Ukraine right now. And going off of all of this information that we've been getting and we've been seeing from Ukrainian sources and also British sources as well, we're starting to see that the Russians have pulled every single fighting unit that they have in Russia, maybe except for some Rosguardia units and the police, and they are now fighting inside of Ukraine. All the way from the 58th Combined Arms Army that was in the Caucasus Mountain region to the 5th Combined Arms Army that was on the Manchurian border. And the VDV that was once in the Baltics area, it is now down in Ukraine as well. And from what we're seeing and what we're being told, the Ukrainians are now analyzing the front, and they're seeing that there are no reinforcements behind the line. There is no strategic reserve that exists anymore in Ukraine, and there is no way for the Russians to create one because all of the units from inside of Russia that would have created that reserve are currently active and fighting on the front lines right now. And so the units that are inside of Bakhmut, and really across the entire front line, it's not just in Bakhmut, this is a whole front issue, they're trapped where they are. They can't leave the front lines, and they can't move anywhere else. If they leave the front lines, like let's just talk about the Russian 72nd Brigade, because many of you all know how badly they're doing down here in the southern flank of Bakhmut. If the 72nd Brigade was to try and disengage from the front lines to resupply and reinforce their unit, they would be leaving an open hole in the Russian lines, and there would be nothing to plug that gap. Throughout most of this war, we have seen that the Russians have had some kind of a strategic reserve where they could pull a unit like the 72nd Brigade off of the line, and then another unit would come forward and take their place. Like the 72nd would be replaced by the 6th Motorized Rifle Brigade or something similar. That would be the normal case, but now that is not the case. The Russians have every single fighting unit that is still able to function on the front lines right now. There is no way for them to take off a brigade like the 72nd and allow them to reinforce, rearm, and get some R&R because there's nothing to replace them with. So these units are trapped where they are. If the Ukrainians started to push more weight onto the southern front, there are no forces anywhere else on the front that the Russians can take and move down there. And there's really no way for the Russian forces in the south to disengage and move up to Bakhmut instead. There's no way for that to happen anymore. There's just nothing behind the lines. And there's nothing to fill in these gaps. So if you moved a unit from the southern front, you would also have to move a unit at the same time from Bakhmut. And then that can't happen because you would have to move them piecemeal. So that way there weren't just two open holes in the front lines or two units were switching spots. So that's not even possible either. And so with the Ukrainians conducting this offensive, they have ensured that Russian forces in this area are stuck. They can't move. And that's also what they've done in the southern front and every other place that the Ukrainians have been conducting an offensive, is that they have forced the Russians into staying in those spots. Russians can't move anymore. There's just no ability for their forces to be able to operate or function like a normal military would. On the other hand, from what we understand from the Ukrainian standpoint and the Ukrainian position, Ukrainian units are still able to have a lot of flexibility, and there is a strategic reserve on the Ukrainian side. It's not an incredibly large one, because the Ukrainian army, of course, is almost directly on par in size, manpower-wise, to Russia's combat forces, even after mobilization. Of course, a lot of that ended up being support troops to make sure that those combat forces were able to operate. They most likely have a strategic reserve. I would assume of multiple brigades, maybe around 10 brigades, which seems like a big amount, but in the relative scale of how big this front line is and how many brigades there are on the Ukrainian side, it is somewhat small. But that is still better than the Russians having no strategic reserve. There are none inside of all of Russia at this point. There are none to commit in Ukraine. And from what we're seeing, things are getting worse, and losses like that 2S1 and also the Penguin drone are going to be helping the Ukrainians to get a better idea of where the Russian weak points are and to whittle down these units even further. And as these units stay on the line, it's not just them staying on the line and being forced to stay in one spot that's an issue. Fatigue becomes an issue. A whole bunch of things become an issue, because as a unit engages in the front line, their condition begins to deteriorate normally. The supply situation gets worse for them because some parts of their unit are pretty much cut off from supplies in some instances, and they're not able to be resupplied unless if that unit disengages from the line and goes behind the line. Fatigue starts to build up because a lot of these soldiers aren't getting any rest at all. They're just continuously on the front lines for weeks, if not months on end, and that ends up fatiguing soldiers, and their combat effectiveness becomes far worse. And we're just starting to see that across the entire front, and that may also be explaining why at this point the Russians are not in a good state whatsoever, is because their units are being attrited, they're being demoralized, they're worn out, they're not getting good enough supplies, and there's no one to reinforce them. And so they just sit there, and their unit ends up deteriorating. And so that is kind of the big news tonight in a nutshell. We'll also be going over that in far deeper analysis once we actually get into those frontline summaries. But this is a fairly large development, especially considering all of the news that has been coming out about this. This is something that's kind of a bit of a bombshell, because even up till now, many people have been thinking there are some units out there somewhere that the Russians could use to reinforce the army in Ukraine. And now it appears that there are none, especially based off of what the British Ministry of Defense has reported. But moving on back into our location unknowns, we also saw the aid package that's going to be sent to Ukraine. And it's not just cluster munitions. Of course, this is what they show about the cluster munition. That's kind of the big deal. But I think there are some fairly bigger deals inside of this package. The United States is providing an aid package of $800 million US, and that includes another 32 Bradley IFVs, M2 Bradleys. That also includes another 32 Stryker armored personnel carriers, 31 M777s, some Patriot missiles for the Patriot surface-to-air missile defense batteries, some more HIMARS missiles for the HIMARS, and our standard artillery shells for the 155 and 105 millimeter guns, as well as the cluster bombs, or the cluster shells, like we're seeing right there. This is a fairly big package, and there's even more to it than this. And to get y'all an exact lay of the land of how much stuff is in this aid package, here is the definitive list that I was able to find. Additional munitions for the Patriot, like we said. They're also going to be sending AIM-7 missiles for air defense. That was a fairly interesting one to me, because AIM-7s are mounted onto some air defense systems, but not many. AIM-7s are actually a radar-guided missile that many aircraft use. You can find these fairly normally on an F-15. And I'll try and show you all these right here. And so let me scroll down. Try and find you a good picture here. So right here, here's an F-15C, and there is some AIM-7s mounted onto the bottom of it. This one's also a Royal Saudi Air Force F-15, but that's beyond the point. It is carrying AIM-7 radar-guided missiles. And that's what was fairly interesting to me about that delivery, is that shows that while the United States is publicly waffling on sending additional aircraft, well, any aircraft at all that are fourth generation, these missiles are used a little bit in air defense, ground air defense, but they're used primarily in air-to-air combat. You can even see a picture right here of an F-15C firing an AIM-7C. And so, well, I'm not really sure which AIM-7 that is. That may be an AIM-7F. I'm not exactly certain on that. But you can see here, It is a fairly common missile to be used by Western aircraft. And it's not just the F-15 that uses them. Of course, that's not even in the picture of sending to Ukraine. The F-16 also uses AIM-7s as well. And I'll try and find y'all a picture of an F-16 carrying some AIM-7s. So let's see here. Those appear to be AIM-120s. That's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for some AIM-7s. But some of the earlier iterations, like the F-16C and also the F-16A, which are the ones that we believe are going to be sent to Ukraine, they did carry AIM-7s, and they still do carry AIM-7s to this day. But unfortunately, I'm having a hard time finding a quick picture of that. F-16, let me just type in AIM-7, maybe we'll get that. And here we go. Here's an F-16 in the U.S. Air Force. This is an F-16A firing an AIM-7 in 2003. And you can see right there, that is a missile that the F-16 does in fact use. And it's now being sent to Ukraine. And it seems as though, while it's under the guise that it's for air defense, this may also be an attempt to get the ammo there before the equipment gets there. And so, fairly interesting development. Hopefully we see that aircraft are soon to follow. They're also sending more Stinger man-pads. They'll also be sending more ammunition for the HIMARS. They'll be sending, of course, the 31 M777s. They'll also be sending 155mm artillery shells, including DP-ICMs and the 105mm rounds. 32 Bradleys, 32 Strikers, more mine-clearing equipment. This is a fairly important one that's kind of falling under the radar for most people to cover, but things like the M58 Miklik make a massive difference, especially in the southern front, where we see massive amounts of minefields have been laid out by the Russians. To be able to clear those and have a lot of systems that can clear those minefields makes a massive difference in the ability for the Ukrainians to avoid bottlenecks and terrible disasters like we saw in that one minefield where the Leopard 2 and the Bradleys ended up being abandoned, and some of the Bradleys ended up being destroyed because they got caught in a bottleneck in the middle of a minefield after their mine-clearing vehicle ended up being destroyed. We can also see that they're getting more TOW missiles, and those are probably some of the best anti-tank guided missiles that they've gotten so far outside of the Javelin. Incredibly good, and also the Bradley uses them quite effectively. They're also getting more Javelins and other anti-armor systems and rockets. They're also going to be getting precision aerial munitions. And once again, another one of those things that when you combine it with the AIM-7, it looks like they're trying to get some of the the front-end equipment, the weaponry, over there into Ukraine before the aircraft arrive. And so once again, a fairly interesting deal there. They'll be getting the Penguin drones, as we were talking about earlier, 27 tactical vehicles to recover equipment. Those are most likely going to be former Pattons or Abram tanks that have been specially designed as recovery vehicles with built-on cranes and such things like that, so that way they can recover the damaged vehicles, bring them back, repair them, and then send them to the front. That helps to make sure that units don't get attrited as quickly as they would be otherwise if those vehicles were abandoned with no way to get them back. We also saw they're going to be getting 10 tactical vehicles to tow and haul equipment. Kind of interesting there, because the recovery of equipment kind of does the same thing, so I don't know what the differentiation is there and what kind of different equipment they're getting, but there is a differentiation in between the kinds, so we'll be hopefully seeing why that's the case. They're also going to be getting demolitions munitions and systems for obstacle clearing. That's most likely the charges for the Mikliks, small arms, and over 28 million rounds of small arms ammunition and grenades, but they don't really divide up how much of that is ammo and how much of that is grenades. And then they'll also be getting some odd-in spare parts and other field equipment just to help them out with the daily goings of the front line and the wear and tear that vehicles undergo. So it's a pretty extensive list. $800 million does get you a large amount of stuff, and it is great to see that we're going to be sending over some things that aren't really covered much but are critically important, like the mine-clearing equipment. And not only that, the AIM-7s, because I'll be waiting to see what the AIM-7s are really used for, because I got to be honest with y'all, I know it says for air defense, and it's kind of aiming towards ground air defense, but that has a lot to do with air-to-air defense. Very few systems use the AIM-7 for as a surface-to-air missile. It's largely just an air-to-air missile as it comes. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit of location of news, where we saw that United 24 made a special clip. And United 24 loves to make special clips, and this time they made one on their brand new toy, the Storm Shadow missile. And so, without further ado, here's the clip.
Arrival of the Storm Shadow cruise missile has rapidly boosted Ukraine's warfaring abilities. Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov even attested the Storm Shadow had a 100% efficiency rate, saying every target was also a hit. On June 12th, Russian Major General Sergei Garyachev was apparently killed by a Storm Shadow strike in Zaporizhia Oblast in light of the ongoing counter-offensive. That's not enough. With the stated goal being the recapturing and reintegration of all of its territories, Ukraine is continuing to look to the west to provide it with more long-range missile systems to defend its territories. Welcome to Talking Tactics, where this week it's all about the Storm Shadow and other long-range missile systems and why Ukraine is so desperately seeking them. The Franco-British, attention full name, Storm Shadow or Scalp EG, is manufactured by the defense company MBDA, a specialist in guided weapons. Although the Storm Shadow is often described as a long-range missile, the term is a little misleading. Storm Shadows don't have a range of thousands of kilometers, but can fly a maximum of about 600. According to the manufacturer, the export version, which Ukraine has received, has been reduced to a little over 250 km. Strategic cruise missiles, such as the Russian Kh-55, for example, fly thousands of kilometers. The Storm Shadows, which are a good 5 meters long and have an estimated unit price of more than 1 million euros, fly comparatively slow at a speed of Mach 0.8 to 0.95 and usually no higher than 30 to 40 meters to avoid enemy radar. So why are they being celebrated so much in Ukraine? With the delivery of the first HIMARS systems in late spring of 2022, the country's defense abilities changed drastically. The HIMARS allowed Ukraine to strike targets deep behind enemy lines, meaning they could not only hit enemy troops that they were engaged in battle with, but attack depots, supply lines, and command centers housing high-ranking Russian officers. The first rockets Ukraine received had a range of about 80 kilometers. In 2023, Kyiv received ground-launched small-diameter bombs for the HIMARS, which can fly up to 150 km.
Wait, when in the world did they get that? They never. Wait, hang on. I gotta pause that video. Nobody ever made an official announcement about the ground-launched small-diameter bombs, and people have been asking questions about that for a good while now, about when did they get them, when did they get them? And we're like, I don't know. I mean, we have no idea. And then they just said right here in United 24 they got them in March. I don't think anyone even heard about that until now. But anyways,
I didn't hear about it either. Also, when did they reduce the range on the Storm Shadow? I thought they were full length, like full range.
I thought they were too, but apparently the export versions just have their range short. And I guess they just go into the computer programming method and they put in range 300 kilometers equals false. And that's it. It just goes to a shorter range. I don't know, but I didn't know that either. I thought the British were sending full-on, full-fledged Storm Shadow missiles with the full range and everything involved, but apparently not. They still are far-reaching, though. 150 miles is not spitting distance. That's pretty long range. You could still reach the Kerch Bridge with a range like that. But anyways, getting back to the video.
All these advantages only made Ukraine want more. The thought, imagine all we can do if we extend our range even beyond what we have. The Storm Shadow represents just exactly this idea come true. Unlike for the ground-based HIMARS, Storm Shadow missiles are launched from a fighter jet. They have a higher range, a high payload, and are very precise. Also, the Storm Shadow has a bunker-busting two-stage warhead. Very simple terms, the so-called precursor charge blows a hole into whatever structure it's hitting. The so-called follow-through bomb goes into the hole and detonates inside. It's a bit surprising, actually, how good these missiles have come to use, since they were never built to be launched via Soviet-era jets. But evidently, Ukraine has found some technical adaptations allowing the Storm Shadow to be launched via Su-24 fighter jet. British Defense Minister Ben Wallace was gifted a photo with the missile attached to a Ukrainian plane. But weapons that hit precise targets need to be fed with precise data, collected from reconnaissance beforehand, but also precise data while launching. Whether we are talking about a ground-based system like the HIMARS or airborne missiles like the Storm Shadow, it's the same. This and the fact that the Storm Shadow should be more compatible with Western jets are two reasons why the arrival of these jets cannot happen soon enough. So, will the Storm Shadow act as an accelerator for the delivery of Western planes, and maybe even a door opener for further weaponry? Until now, the discussion of Western military aid to Ukraine has always followed the same pattern. Initial resistance, followed by hesitance, followed by some countries making the first step, and setting precedents for the rest. It was like this with tanks, with their defense systems, with fighter jets. So, the delivery of the Storm Shadow might be just that for long-range missile systems. And there already is an ongoing debate in the USA and in Germany about the potential delivery of longer-range weaponry. For the USA, the ATACMS is a viable option, which would be giving Ukraine a range of over 300 kilometers with their HIMARS. Another option is the German-Swedish Taurus KAPD-350, which has been described as the Storm Shadow's evil twin, very similar in weight, size, shape, payload, and speed, but with a higher range. What's stopping them? A big underlying question, or let's say the reason for this hesitance, is the ability of these weapons to be used by Ukraine to hit targets on Russian soil. Basically a question of how far does the right to defend yourself go? That, of course, is a difficult question, as it has potential legal and actual consequences. Okay, at this point you could say, isn't the Russian invasion illegal? Are they not committing humanitarian crimes daily? The answer is yes, of course they are. But that's not how Russia sees it. And if you look more carefully, they still try to find some legal justification for their so-called special operation, as well as avoid the consequences of calling it a full-scale war, which would include martial law in Russia maybe, full mobilization and so on. Some Western politicians fear that attacking Russia on its own soil has the potential for provoking unseen consequences on a global level. The position of many Ukrainians is just fundamentally different. To be able to protect the country, its border, people, nature and animals, the army needs to do everything it can. And long-range missiles as well as F-16s or modern tanks are the only language Russia seems to understand. Anyway, that's it for Talking Tactics. We hope you enjoy.
So real quick, we've got to go back for a minute because I see a lot of y'all saying about the ground-launched small diameter bombs, because what we had heard was similar to what some of y'all are saying other YouTubers also heard, that the ground-launched small diameter bombs have been delayed, and they were not going to be reaching Ukraine until later on in the fall, pretty much when everything else would be making it into Ukraine. So let's go back real quick, and let's keep in mind this. We have to keep this in mind. United 24 is kind of a go-to source, and they are the actual be-all and kind of end-all to this whole deal, because United 24 is an extension of the Ukrainian government itself. And so if they make a statement like this, it has to be assumed, considering they are an extension of the Ukrainian government, that this is a statement that the Ukrainians have actually sponsored and that they gave the green light. And so if he said that they have them, that means they must actually have these things, and they've had them for a while now. So let's go back and listen to that again.
The first rockets Ukraine received had a range of about 80 kilometers. In 2023, Kyiv received ground-launched small-diameter bombs for the HIMARS, which can fly up to 150 km. But all these advantages only made Ukraine want more. The thought...
Hang on. There's an interesting wordage there. Tell me, Matthew, what do you think of that? We're going to play that again.
Engaged in battle with, but attacked depots, supply lines, and command centers housing high-ranking Russian officers. The first rockets Ukraine received had a range of about 80 kilometers. In 2023, Kyiv received ground-launched small-diameter bombs for the HIMARS, which can fly up to 150 km. But all these advantages only made Ukraine want more.
So that's an interesting statement.
Sounds like they got them.
It sounds like they got them, but he didn't say exactly when in 2023 they got them. But it does sound like he made a statement along the lines of they have them, and it has increased the range of the HIMARS. So going off of that, that actually makes everyone on the internet wrong. If we're taking this the right way, that makes us wrong. That makes every other YouTuber they all have been referencing wrong. Because apparently, according to United 24, they've had them now for a little bit. We don't know how long. It's been at least during 2023, so it may have been a few months at this point. But it sounds like they actually have them. And also,
that might have been a goof up because for nobody else to announce that yet, I'm not sure if they were supposed to say that.
Yeah, I don't know if they were, because that would be the first. That would be a bombshell. Actually, that would be the first time ever anywhere anyone said that the Ukrainians have those yet. Because from everything everyone's been saying, they don't have them, and now they're saying that in 2023 they. Let's listen to that one more time. We've got to make this extremely clear.
In 2023, Kyiv received ground-launched...
They received. So that word means that they have them. They're in the Ukrainian army's possession. So that clearly means they actually have them and are using them right now, at least according to United 24. And I would have to go with what United 24 says, considering that they get information from the Ukrainian government and Ministry of Defense to make these videos and make them happen. So with that in mind, 150-kilometer range. Let's hop over here to this map. How far is Berdyansk from the front line? Let's measure that. All right, so we're going to go from here down to here. So you could have... You know, that's interesting right there. Because it's been very weird to see that there's been multiple strikes by the Ukrainians in places like Berdyansk, Mariupol, Melitopol, and so on. There's been a large amount of them, to the point that it's become almost far-fetched to believe that all of them are storm shadows. And based off of a 150-kilometer range that we've measured out right here, it is entirely possible that a HIMARS with a ground-launched small-diameter bomb could be sitting as far back as Pokrovsk in the southern front and fire off a ground-launched small-diameter bomb, and that ground-launched small-diameter bomb can reach Berdyansk. So... let's see. Some people said it looks like they may have only been able to get a few of them working. Perhaps. But it is entirely possible that they got the ground-launched small-diameter bombs, a limited number of them, at the same time they got the storm shadows. And so things are starting to get a little confusing here, because we see strikes way behind the lines now we don't really know if they are ground-launched small-diameter bombs or if they're Storm Shadows. Because we know that the Luhansk strikes were committed by a Storm Shadow. We have seen that, and that is confirmed. But other strikes, like the ones in Berdyansk, Mariupol, and Melitopol, those could easily be some kind of a ground-launched small-diameter bomb. And according to United 24, the Ukrainians do have them, so it is entirely possible that that is what they're actually using. So that is...
It sounded to me like the way he was talking about it, like maybe the GLSDBs didn't perform as well as they thought. They weren't talking about them in a very positive light. They acted like the Storm Shadow was a much bigger deal.
Well, they kind of glanced over it really quickly. Like, I hate to do this again, y'all, but let's go back and listen to it again, because notice that it's kind of like, I think they may have just been trying to make a quick reference, you know, because the Russians watch everything, and so maybe that's what the attempt was, is to make a quick reference, letting them know they have them, and then that was it, and just move on. So let's listen to it again.
Ukraine received had a range of about 80 kilometers. In 2023, Kyiv received ground-launched small-diameter bombs for the HIMARS, which can fly up to 150 km. But all these advantages only made Ukraine want more. The thought, imagine all we can do if we extend our range even beyond what we have. The Storm Shadow.
So it sounds like, because the video is about the Storm Shadow, so it's trying to make it sound like the Storm Shadow is the best thing there. It does sound like, though, they didn't really have anything negative to say, though, to be honest, now that we're hearing it again, about the ground-launched small-diameter bomb. It just sounds like it has a shorter range than the Storm Shadow, which it does. So this is just a really weird video, because this throws the entire ground-launched small-diameter bomb thing on its head, because we didn't know that they had them until this video came out. So that's fairly interesting. That's really interesting, actually. We're going to have to be looking into that a little bit more, because I think that is the only thing that has gotten that close to an official confirmation by the Ukrainian government that they have them. But with that, we're now going to be moving on out of that amazing video that confirmed a weapon that we didn't know was there, and also talked a little bit more about how the Ukrainians have been using the Storm Shadow. Moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, we could also see a Ukrainian soldier, after he heard the news of the massive arms package, hitting the sickest gritty. Observe. And we're going to have to mute that, but you can see the Ukrainian soldier there hitting the sickest of gritties. I mean, this thing is absolutely sick. Like Matthew.
Damn.
And that's the end of the clip.
Wow.
That was the reception to the news. And I got to say, that's one hell of a reception for sure. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our last bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours. And it was pretty good.
Oh,
7.
wow, they got another 7 Bobcats? Was it in a 7 yesterday?
I think it was.
Dang, that's consistent. I like that.
Man, they hitting us with that consistency. They're trying to get you back hyped up and out of being sick. They're like, look, another 7. And man, it's going to be like, oh, I feel much better. But also, Butchie put in one of those Rhodesian ugly armored car things.
And a sapper for supper. Isn't a sapper a person?
Isn't the sapper the guy who would be in that vehicle?
Yeah, why is he for supper? What's going on here?
Dude, you open that thing up, and he's, all right, boys, eat me up. It's like, nah, I'm good, pal, I'm good. But let's see here. Let's look for the other memes. I don't know why I went so quiet there, but sadly, no other memes rather than Butchies. But 7 special equipment vehicles were destroyed, and we saw that they were also accompanied by an incredibly large number of almost every category of frontline equipment the Russians have. 510 Russian soldiers bit the dust, which is a fairly average number, but they were also accompanied by 12 armored personnel carriers, once again an average number, and 10 supply trucks, a pretty average number as well. We also saw that the Russians lost 2 main battle tanks. Not the highest number we've seen, but that is still a good number nonetheless. We also saw that they lost 20 artillery pieces, 17 drones, an MLRS, 7 cruise missiles that were shot down overnight, and 4 anti-aircraft warfare systems. So today was a pretty big day of losses for the Russians. Usually, we see that some categories are in the average, and a decent amount of them are below average. Today, almost all of the losses were average or a little above average in every category except for the tanks. And so today was a really good day for the Ukrainian army, and hopefully these losses are equating to some frontline change, and spoiler alert, they are, and we're about to be getting to that right now. And so moving on out of the location unknowns and on into the front lines, we'll be starting in the northeast, moving our way into Bakhmut. Well, actually, never mind. We're going to be moving into Bakhmut first, then the southern front, and then we'll be going into the northeast, because the northeast, of course, is largely inactive. But we're going to be moving into the areas where we've seen the most activity and the Ukrainian advances today. But many of y'all have had loads of questions, and the live chat has been absolutely like electric tonight. It has been going in a million miles an hour ever since the stream started, and a lot of y'all have had many questions, and Matthew has also been throwing up those questions as leading questions of the night and asking y'all what y'all are thinking about them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and moving right into our first poll, it says the U.S. says it's sending cluster munitions because the offensive in Ukraine is slower than expected. And what are your thoughts? 68% said that will speed things up. 21% said it will help, but not tremendously. 6% said unsure, and 4% said it seems like a lame move. And I have to say that I really don't think Ukraine's offensive is going as slow as the U.S. is trying to make it out to be. I think it's making good progress. Of course, it's not, rapid like the U.S. loves to see stuff happening super quick. But then again, Ukraine is having to fight against pretty entrenched Russian forces, so they're doing pretty good considering the circumstances. I think the cluster munitions will definitely help, but I don't think it's going to speed things up tremendously. But it's definitely not going to hurt things. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I would also have to agree, it's not going to be just blowing away the Russians. It will help the Ukrainians, though, to make the advances they need to make. But at the same time, I'm not expecting the thing to just change the war forever. So, in my opinion, it's going to be great. It will help out. But it's not going to be war-changing. Also, I have to agree with Matthew that the United States, for some reason, is going out of its way to make it sound like the offensive isn't going as well as everyone hoped. From what we're telling, it's going pretty good. It's not going terribly, but it's also not going exceptionally either. It's kind of in the middle. So I don't know why the U.S. is trying to make it sound really bad. Maybe so that way they can sponsor more support for Ukraine. But still, hopefully the cluster munitions will help out in some form or some way. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and let's get on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says the U.S. says it sees no signs of Wagner or nukes in Belarus and urges skepticism. And what are your thoughts? 66% said I agree, be very skeptical of it. 14% said unsure. 14% also said it's too tough to tell. And 5% said I disagree, there's misinformation. And on this one, I gotta say, it is too tough to tell what is going on still. We covered this somewhat yesterday. We said that Lukashenko said there were no Wagner forces in Belarus. That was a new revelation that came out yesterday. Now the U.S. is saying they don't see them in Belarus themselves, nor do they see any signs of those nukes that Russia allegedly has transferred to them either. So maybe the whole situation is a complete farce that Russia and Belarus is trying to pull off. I'm not sure exactly what the farce is going to try to have an end result of doing, but it could be. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I don't really know what's going on at this point. There's even news that Prigozhin is still in Russia and the Wagner group still exists in some form. So I don't really know what's going on anymore at this point as far as that goes. So I'm going to have to say I'm going to have to fall within the I don't know category, because who knows what's really happening there anymore. We're hearing from Belarus that Wagner isn't there. From the Russians, they're saying that Wagner is going there and Prigozhin is already there. And then Lukashenko then said that Prigozhin is in St. Petersburg, where his house is. And everything's just confusing. And now the United States is saying there's no nukes, there's no Wagner there, there's nothing there. And then that just adds a whole new layer of confusion to the whole thing. So, in all honesty, I would have to say I don't even know right now. I'm just going to wait and see what happens, and then we'll get a clearer story and a clearer picture then. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says the West says no to inviting Ukraine to NATO in July, and Zelensky says that weakens the alliance. And what are your thoughts? 34% said I agree, this weakens NATO. 31% said I don't think it's a big deal. 18% said unsure, and 16% said I disagree, this saves NATO. And I think the West has been saying for some time now that Ukraine will not be in NATO until after the war is over. But in the meantime, the EU has made security guarantees to basically placate Ukraine in the meantime. But it looks like Zelensky is still upset that they can't get into NATO, or at least get an invitation. And on the invitation side of things, I do understand that. It seems like NATO could probably go ahead and extend a formal invitation that would be active when the war is over, but it seems like they can't quite commit to that just yet. So on this one, I'm going to say I'm unsure. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I don't really think it makes the NATO alliance weaker because it's been clear since the beginning of the war that Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO until the war is over. So I don't really think this is weakening the NATO alliance at all. And also, I don't really know how the NATO alliance can be weakened considering that it's not stepping up to defend a country that is not in NATO. NATO is a defensive alliance that's directed inwards towards its members, not outwards towards people that just kind of neighbor it. That wouldn't make it a defensive organization. That would make it an offensive organization, which is not how the treaty is worded. So I don't think it's weakening the alliance at all, but I also don't think, like Matthew said, it would hurt to at least extend a formal invitation to them that will become active once the war ends. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that being said, we are fresh out of poll questions. But moving on to our super chat questions, up first we have a $20 donation from JD Mako 23, longtime channel viewer, and thank you very much for that support. He says, "Did you know that Bruce Lee had a vegan brother? ... His name was Broccoli."
Oh my god. Oh
he
my
says, "Take
god.
a question for the chat, please."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, JD Mako. That one actually hit me like a bus, man. Like that hit me like a truck. I don't know why, but I was like, oh my god. I was expecting something. I was like, how the hell can you make Lee work with something? And then I heard broccoli, and I was like, oh god. But still, thank you so much for the support, JD Mako, and throwing in a pretty good joke as well. And of course, being an old guard of this channel and helping this channel to keep on running. Folks like you have been around forever. And not only that, you help to support things like the Coffee Fund, which is what we'll be putting that towards. We'll be putting that towards the Coffee Fund. Matthew drinks what I call chalk water, and I also drink Liquid Death. Not Liquid Death, not like the company Liquid Death. It's Busy Nitro Cold Brew, but it tastes like Liquid Death. So I got to thank you so much, JD Mako, for supporting our coffee addiction, and we will be making sure to grab a live chat right now. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question goes to Tim Snuck, who says, "Another YouTuber says that Boeing and Saab have delayed the GLSDB until the fall, so I'm very confused, and what are your thoughts?"
My thoughts would be, and I say this with humility, that YouTubers are not always right on everything. We aren't always right on everything. That, happens every once in a while. No one's ever always right on everything. And considering that that United 24 made that statement in that video that they had received, they didn't say they will receive, they said they had received, meaning that that's past tense. They actually have them at the moment and have been using them. That must mean that they do have them. And that must mean that we're all wrong on YouTube. Every single YouTuber so far, based off of that statement, that has said that they do not have ground-launched small diameter bombs is wrong, because they apparently do have them. That completely shocked me when I heard it, and that's also where that question came from, because I saw it come in after that. I was very shocked, because I didn't watch that whole video. I watched the first minute just to see if it was good, and I was like, yep, it's good, we'll put it on. I didn't hear that part, though. I didn't hear the part where he said they had received them, and that was a bombshell to me. That's probably a bombshell to a lot of y'all as well, because no official statement has been made by a Ukrainian government apparatus that they have those things. And that was the first announcement or the first confirmation that it had ever been made. And so I would have to be honest, I just think that all the YouTubers have been wrong so far, because we're trying to go off of publicly sourced information, and publicly sourced information isn't always correct. And that's always why it's interesting to me, because and also this is something else interesting, is that we'll talk about things like the nuclear power plant or something similar, and people want to go, oh, it's not that serious because a YouTuber out there said it isn't. Well, yeah, but we also said they don't have ground-launched small diameter bombs, yet they do, and that just came out today. So, YouTubers aren't always right on everything. And, hell, we might be wrong on what we're saying about the nuclear power plant because it hasn't come to pass yet. The other YouTubers may be right, who knows? But it's always important to remember that the news the public gets and the information we get as a part of the public that we're able to put on this channel isn't always accurate. We're not in the negotiating rooms in the White House or in Downing Street where they're coming up with these ideas to send things that otherwise the public doesn't know about, like the AGM-88 anti-radiation missiles that were sent last year, and the Storm Shadow missiles that were sent this year, and the ground-launched small diameter bombs that apparently have been sent. We don't even know anything about, really, beyond that one statement. We are, once again, working off of a lot of public information as well. We're not really privy to that much information that may be sensitive. Honestly, we almost get the same information y'all get. So you know, I think everyone was just wrong on that, and we've all, and everyone on YouTube was just proven wrong with that one simple statement. And also, someone said, "Isn't United 24 YouTube?" It's a little different though. United 24 is an official part of the Ukrainian government. That's why you can click on the link in the description below to go to United 24, and it says that it's a part of the Ukrainian government made under the order of President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Even better than that. It's basically Zelensky's pet project, essentially.
Yeah, like here, I'll just pull it up for y'all. United 24. We can go to their website. Oh, by the way, that's probably the best thing. United 24 dash the initiative of the president of Ukraine. So, you know, I would say this is a lot more believable than Joe Schmo or me, because it's the initiative of the president of Ukraine. If they say something, that's what we have to go with, because they're the ones who most likely have the know-how and the information. This is coming from the executive branch of the Ukrainian government, the office of the president, and this is an extension of that office. But moving on into the website, let me move on down. Let's see. Reports every week, so that's the total they've
Wow, they've raised some serious funds, 420 million.
Man, they're 420. Hey! But anyways, moving on down.
No.
Oh no, I know the live chat's about to be filled with something in particular, but anyways, let's see. Project about United 24.
There he is, right there.
Yeah, look at that. The idea is simple. Let's see. To unite the world around the platform allows one-click donations to Ukraine from anywhere. Let's see. No one was ready for full United 24. Collaboration goals establish an efficient work process that brings Ukraine's victories closer. Let me try and find you all the part where it says it was made by the office of the president. Is United 24? What is legal? So, let's see. So here we go. Here's how United 24 runs, just to let y'all know how tied into the Ukrainian government it is. 100% of the funds raised are transferred to the official accounts of the National Bank of Ukraine linked to key ministries: the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Healthcare, and the Ministry of Infrastructure. It's not even technically a 501 nonprofit like you would see here in the United States. This thing is an extension of the Ukrainian government. It is a fundraising machine for the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Healthcare, and the Ministry of Infrastructure. And in turn, they proportion some of those funds into paying that guy you see on that video that we just watched, and also making all the infographics and such things for those videos, because it helps to push the name of United 24 out there, and it encourages more fundraising. And so, as y'all can see, this is not just a random YouTube channel like the Enforcer or anyone. This is an official extension of the Ukrainian government. So when they say something like "we received ground-launched small diameter bombs," it carries a whole lot more weight, and it has to be taken as completely true when compared to the words of someone like me when I say we don't really know if they're there, because I don't. And I'm not the Ukrainian government. I'm just trying to get information and then present it to y'all. So I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much for sponsoring that live chat, JD Mako. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is a $20 super chat from none other than Hoodoo Texas, another longtime channel viewer, and thank you very much, Hoodoo, for that support. He says, "You want to see what created the LSA? Go to day 27 at the 1 hour mark. Enforcer suggested Leaf Spring Gang, or Leaf Spring Battalion at 132, but Army later came up in the hilarious comments that day, and then Matt joined on day 22. History." And Hoodoo's like the LSA historian at this point. He knows the dates and the times.
Man, he does. You know, let's go and look for that real quick. I'm gonna have to scroll through literally hundreds of streams to find it though. Let me see here. The Enforcer. I wonder if I can type this up on the search bar. Day 27. If I type that in, do I get a stream? Oh my god, I do! That's pretty cool. Okay. So, it looks like I've already been here before, and also this gives you all a flashback to way back in the day. So when was the Leaf Spring?
Sure, but from what the video.
Oh my god, that was a bad mic. But
Man, there's that mic. That was rough.
Yeah, but when was the Leaf Spring Army mentioned? What was the timestamp for that again?
It was, excuse me, it was at the 1 hour mark. Yeah, 1 hour mark.
Exactly 1 hour in?
Yes.
Exactly 1 hour in. So this is the truck. The burned out Pantsier. And this is the Pantsier where the Leaf Spring Army would come from. And here it comes. He's about to look at the Leaf Spring. There it is down there.
машина здесь проезжала.
Hang on, wait a minute. I don't know a lot about cars, but is that a leaf spring? Goodness. I mean, that stuff is used on like steam trains in the 1940s. That stuff in America was kind of phased out, like finally in like
Oh
the
my God.
40s and the 50s.
That's
Like,
it.
Oh,
kind of
damn.
suspension on anything modern in America. Yet in Russia, they're still using this kind of suspension system. Now that is archaic. Now you can say you're in
Oh my God, man!
Oh man,
I
that's
was really
secondhand
souping
cringe I'm
that
getting
up.
from that
Yeah.
right now.
That's it. That was wrong, very wrong. Because you always see, like right afterwards, this was the thing, is that people were saying it was wrong in the live chat. So I immediately went to Wikipedia and
But I
started
have to
pulling
go
up
look
stuff
if
about
that's
leaf
a
springs. You'll see that right here.
axle for real, because that is like, that's like old fashioned if it is. A leaf spring, leaf spring suspension. Let me see if that's like the right name. Yep, that's it. Yeah. That's a leaf. That
Oh
was a
my
leaf
God.
suspension. I don't think those were used.
Can you believe this was like 480 days ago?
That's crazy. I mean, you sound like an infant in
Interesting. Well,
those.
actually, the 2016
I know, it's
Volvo
crazy.
XC90 has a leaf spring. That's really interesting. But I heard that these were generally phased out for more modern suspension systems.
And of course, everything I'm saying here is completely wrong. It turns out that leaf springs are used on a lot of modern vehicles, and then I got flamed for that. But when did Hoodoo, Texas say that we came up with the name, the Leaf Spring Army? Where was that?
Oh, it looks like at the 1 hour 32 mark.
1 hour and 32 mark. So we came up with that pretty quickly after said it. Also, Matty, very interesting how you were on this stream and you weren't talking at all. Like not at all. I didn't hear
Nah,
you say
man. Back in
anything.
the beginning, I was just focused on doing the basics. I wasn't saying nothing.
So let's listen here. Let's see if I did say anything.
А куда там не видно абсолютно, там просто горизонт.
I hope it actually happens.
Сейчас посмотреть на это из окна. Смотрю, что-то летит, такое, о, что-то жесткое.
Man, this guy's getting into it.
Я надеюсь, это просто плановое учение, хотя это близко возле города. Собственно, вот город. Сам
Michael Phoenix said, where you got roasted. Yeah, I got roasted, man. Like a damn coffee bean. 1 hour and 37, you said?
Yes, 132.
Well, we're at 132 and we're watching a missile. Are you sure this is the right day, day 27?
Yeah, he said 120. Yeah, 27, and it's 132.
Alright, so I took a break during that video to look at the chat, and I can see that y'all have become huge fans of the whole leaf spring thing. So, on top of coffee, and on top of me saying that being said, it looks like, that being said, y'all have become a big fan of leaf springs. So, pretty interesting that would be what's caught on. So, y'all are, I'm going to call y'all the Leaf Spring Gang, or the Leaf Spring Battalion probably, as time goes on, because that's a really interesting thing. Out of all the things y'all could have picked, y'all picked leaf springs.
I was actually bewildered back then. I was like, y'all picked leaf springs.
Yeah, I just saw John Lindsay say, "May the leaf spring be with you," and I can't agree more. May the leaf springs be with you. And so now we're going to move on to the news.
So anyways, y'all can see right there, that was the first mention of the Enforcer community being leaf spring anything. That's actually the origin of it right here on day 27. Really at like 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 30 seconds or so. That was about the point where the Leaf Spring Army came into being, was around day 27. Pretty wild, really. And I gotta thank you so much for sharing that with us, Hoodoo, Texas. And going back and finding this stuff, this is pretty crazy to think that this was nearly a year and a half. It was a year and a half ago at this point, but nearly 480 days ago. Because tomorrow will be the 500th day of this war, and it's going to be a pretty big deal, kind of like every 100 days has always been on this channel. But that is insane. And also, I sounded totally different. Now, you know, whenever people say that our show, like haters say that our show has been getting worse as the war goes on, and I go back to these videos like day 27 and I listen to them, we've been getting better. Like, I'm not even saying that just to say it. We have been getting better for sure, because I don't even know what kind of delivery that was. It was very quiet. The microphone quality was crap. Everything got better. Everything got way better. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support, Hoodoo, Texas, and bringing us back down memory lane all the way back to the very beginning of the war to listen to when the Leaf Spring Army was founded, which was very early on in the war, actually, crazily enough. But with that, Thank you so much once again for the support, Hoodoo. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the frontline news in Bakhmut.
All right, and the last one of the segment goes to Ranked Scrub, who puts in an 8. And thank you very much for the support. And Ranked Scrub said, why hasn't the USA just ordered for 1,000 engine replacements for the Abrams and just give Ukraine something they can use? Performance be damned. And they need anything they can move, I say, and make a solution.
And I thank you so much for the support, Ranked Scrub. I don't know why you're a scrub, but, you know, work on it. But still, to answer that question, it would be very expensive to retool not retool, but to refit an Abrams to have a different kind of engine in it. Let's see, 1,000, just give Ukraine something they can use. I don't really know why they're doing that, though, because from what I understand, a lot of those Abrams would be operational, so I don't know what the hell we're doing if it's just like a freaking servicing for 1,000 of them. And we're not even giving them 1,000 of them. I think we're giving like 60 of them or something. It's not that big of a number compared to what that is. I don't know why we're doing that, though. Because when you look at an Abrams engine, and I've tried to do a lot of research on the Abrams Honeywell jet turbine, and you heard that right, it's a Honeywell engine. Kind of like the space heaters you used to have in your house that were also made by a Honeywell. The engine in the Abrams is made by a Honeywell, or at least it's a Honeywell design. It may be contracted out to different companies to make them. But you know what? I just missed the engine. I've got to go find that Honeywell AG something something engine. Let me see. There it is, the Honeywell AGT 1500 multi-fuel turbine engine. So what's really neat about the Honeywell turbine engine is that this thing, unlike the Chieftains, if any of y'all know about British Chieftains and military history, Chieftains diesel engines, well, they weren't diesel engines, they were a multi-fuel internal combustion engine. They were supposed to be able to run on just about any kind of fuel. In reality, they hardly ran on any fuel, period, because the engine was too experimental and it just didn't really end up working. However, the turbine engine that's inside of an Abrams, it actually works incredibly well. It can work on anything. It can work on jet fuel, kerosene, diesel, whatever you want to put in there, it will run on it. It's supposed to run on jet fuel, aircraft-grade jet fuel. But you can put kerosene in it if you need to. You can also put diesel in it. And that is great. And that is actually a very good feature of the Abrams, because jet fuel does not freeze, and jet fuel does not crystallize in colder temperatures. In Ukraine, diesel engines, like found on the Leopard 2, can actually end up having their diesel fuel crystallize inside of the fuel tanks and the fuel pumps, which can end up causing a lot of engine issues for the Leopards and might take them out of winter service altogether. That can't happen with the Abrams, because once the winter months start coming around, you can find the aircraft-grade jet fuel, which I'm sure the Ukrainians have some, or they'll be able to acquire enough to operate their fleet of Abrams, and they can continue to operate in far colder weather. And also, someone said diesel is safe. Diesel is safe. Really, none of these fuels have a very low combustion temperature. It's actually incredibly high, and diesel requires a decent amount of compression to even ignite. So diesel is incredibly safe, but diesel can still crystallize in colder temperatures like you would find in Ukraine. So the Abrams is well suited to really any weather conditions, and you can change out the fuels so that way it can be, and it also has the ergonomics provided so that way it can operate in warm conditions or it can operate in cold conditions. The Abrams, unlike a Merkava, actually has a air conditioner and a heater built into it. I've heard that the air conditioners are an iffy thing, however, because I've heard a lot of people say that they end up breaking down and they don't really work much, but at the same time, usually repair crews would be dedicated to the tanks more than any other equipment in the military, because the people who are tankers, they practically live in the tanks for days, and so they have to have an air conditioner or a heater, because they'll end up dying in there from heat stroke or freezing to death if they don't have an operational heater or AC. But the ergonomics of the Abrams is truly next level, even compared to other Western tanks like the Leopard 2. And the Leopard 2 is amazing, and the diesel engine that it has is absolutely incredible. But I can understand why it may be taking time, and I always try and understand a little bit of what the U.S. government may be going through. You've got a massive bureaucratic apparatus that is trying to move these things over there. And if you've ever dealt with the federal government, I haven't had to deal with the federal government, but if you have, many people say it's an incredibly inefficient machine, and it is.
Oh, we've all dealt with the federal government. If you file taxes, you know how inefficient it is. But real quick, I saw Casey say something in the live chat. He said, let him know that's incorrect. Jet fuel can freeze at very cold temperatures. That's why jet engines have fuel heaters.
Really, let's see. Freezing point of jet fuel. But that's negative, let's see, freezing point. That's around negative 100 degrees Celsius, though. And that would be pretty hard to get those kinds of ground conditions in Ukraine, or really anywhere in the world, unless if you were in the Arctic or the Antarctic. That would be pretty tough to get down to a negative 100 degrees Celsius temperature. And let me make sure that's correct. Around negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And in Ukraine, we've seen the temperatures get down to the single digits, but we've never seen them go negative from what I remember last winter. And so, in a relative scale, jet fuel does freeze, yes, but it doesn't freeze at the average temperatures you're going to be finding in Ukraine. Now, let's pull this up. Freezing temperature of diesel, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So diesel will freeze at the same temperature water will freeze at. Jet fuel will not. And so you could end up getting crystallization with diesel fuel in normal weather conditions, but you can't, well you won't with jet fuel. So pretty interesting. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. That may be why we're seeing some delays, is because we want to make sure that the engines operate correctly, so that way the Abrams will arrive in the winter months. The Ukraine can sustain itself on Leopard 2s during the summer because they'll operate fine then, but once the fall and the winter start coming around, they're going to need a tank that can still operate in colder conditions, so that way the fuel inside of it doesn't end up crystallizing and these tanks end up becoming useless. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the Bakhmut battlefield. We've been getting a lot of video and picture evidence out of this area today, and over the past 24 hours, and making sure to update this just in case of the Deep State fellows, and they updated it while we were running the stream. Over the past 24 hours, they're not showing any visible advances, but the Ukrainians are still pushing these lines, and from what we can tell, they are making some pretty decent progress. Starting in the northern flank, we saw a Ukrainian CV-90. This is one of the first videos that we've gotten of a CV-90 on the front lines, and this is around the Bakhmut area, coming along a destroyed T-90M. And also we're going to be muting that. But we can see the guys dismounting the CV-90, hopping off the side, and going to take a look at the destroyed T-90M in front of them. And there it is. And the Ukrainians go hopping on this thing like a playground, looking inside of it and seeing the burned out remains of Russia's finest main battle tank that is actually usable. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. And very nice to see. We're now going to be moving on from that and into the center of Bakhmut, where we saw a javelin hitting a Russian tank in Bakhmut. There's the tank right there. Look at that. There it is. Here we can see the Russian tank in its natural environment, and we have now seen it become the victim of a javelin. You know, I feel like I ought to add in the sound effects there, like the... Well, you know, nah, that's not it. It was supposed to be like a whistle sound. The javelin is an incredible, dangerous beast for the T-90s. But anyways, we can see the tank burning up right there. The tank in the front, it appears that the crew is just bailing out of that one. So they lost one tank to abandonment, and the other one got destroyed by a javelin. A fairly good record altogether. Moving on towards the front in Bakhmut, to the western side, we also saw Russian forces being directly targeted by Ukrainian artillery. Alright, we're going to be muting that. Now we can see the tank down there already burning. And we now see that thing roasting as more artillery lands in the area. And that's the end of that clip. But very nice to see that the 76th Airborne Brigade is continuing to strike and destroy Russian targets on the western side of the city. Moving on down to the south, where we see the most activity, we've seen that the 3rd Brigade and the Fighting 93rd have continued to push the area and are now engaging in combat right on the outskirts of Klishkivka, as video showed today. Starting in Opitne, we saw that some Russian soldiers were knocked out behind the lines before they were able to even engage Ukrainian forces. Alright, we're going to be muting that. We can see the Russians right down there in the field. It appears that they're sleeping. Now let me make sure. Oh, well, they're really taking good naps. And so, if y'all want to see the rest of that clip, y'all can go click on the link in the description below for the map. Go check it out, as those guys are taking long naps. We're going to be moving on to the front line, where we also saw a Russian tank being destroyed by a javelin by the 93rd. Making sure that this is a different one here. Because the last one, this is a different one. And so here's the clip. Man, they got the Chad music playing on this one.
Deep trap on that one. Deep fried.
Be the bigger man! But we can see the javelin firing right there. It's about to be coming right back down on top of that tank. Any minute now. It's got a little bit of travel time to it. Don't worry, everyone. And there we go. Javelin blew up right on top of the T-72, knocking it on out. Another Russian tank knocked out by a javelin today. St. Javelin always protects. We're now going to be moving on down into the area of Klishkivka, where we saw continued fighting in the southern flank of the area, mostly around Klishkivka. Also, apparently this squad is called the Decepticons. Just in case if there are any Transformer fans out there in the audience, they're called the Decepticons. Man, they hitting the sick ready. Hit that stinky leg, blade. We now see them dismounting the APC and advancing into the trees.
Галичина! Встань за дерево чуть-чуть! Вперед, газ, давай!
They're continuing to advance, and their bullets are advancing a little quicker than the infantry and catching a couple of Russians on the way out. Some Russians in that tree line. He's going, oh, please, I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be at home. But then I volunteered. Or I came from prison or something. You see Ukrainian Lobinade. There we go. You see the YPR out there chilling.
Прикрывай!
What the hell? Wait a minute, did you see that, Matthew? This guy sat there and he said, here, we're about to have a peep show. There's a Russian in this trench. Pay a quarter and you'll be able to see him. And the Ukrainian paid a quarter and he said, okay, have your fill. And he just lifts up the curtain and the Ukrainian starts firing into the bunker. And it appears the Ukrainian has confirmed it is cleared. And now the Russian artillery is coming in on the area. It's coming in thick, too. And we hear some going on in the distance. We now see them getting into one of the former Russian bunkers here.
Вас взяла в плен 3-я окрема штурмова бригада.
And we now see that they've captured some Russian prisoners.
Другой штурмовая рота, другой штурмовой взвод. Взвод Дацика. 10 Септиконы. И вас никто не будет.
Right now that Russian man is going, we are the mole people. We come from the ground. We burrow through the earth. We give ourselves up to you. It's like, it's a little weird.
Не резать. Если вы ранены, вам оказывают медицинскую помощь. Все с вами будет хорошо. Кушайте, парни, кушайте.
And they tossed a butterfinger at him. It appears he's not picking it up.
Ну я что, похож на пэтчика, ебать? Больно? Просто робіть те, що кажуть, і кажіть правду, поняли? Типа, повірте, воно все перевіряється, нахуй. Если вы пиздите, да. Ви ще нам
They're now taping them up.
Ми не вбивали вас, а просто заходили, брали в плен, нахуй.
And that's the end of the clip. But that's what the 3rd Brigade has been doing right outside of Klishkivka today, and almost making it into the village. Moving on into our last clip from the Bakhmut area, we also saw the Russians getting hammered, but it's not their normal way of getting hammered with some vodka and a good time. This is getting hammered with a drone bomb. And loud-ass music. Check it out. There's the Russians, right there, at the end of that trench. There's the Ukrainian drone set onto 2 bricks with a small bomb on it. And here it goes. And it hit right on the trench. That's what we call...
That was easy work.
Hell, that was easy. That was easy. But anyways...
Wow, they make it look easy.
Trapple, you must be feeling better now for sure, because you're getting back into the we make it look easy. But with that...
Man, I'm just mustering up that energy for that fine impression, I'm telling you.
Man, you know what I mean? We make it look easy. Real trapaholics. Walk with your boys. But anyways, moving on out of the Bakhmut area, the Ukrainians are continuing to push here and continuing to make advances. Moving on to the area of Ivnopilia, we also saw some Mastiffs advancing down a country road. And as they were advancing down this road, considering that it is a country road, you could hear in the faint distance, almost heaven, West Virginia. And here they come. There's one Mastiff. Here comes the second one. I'm not going to lie, Mastiffs are super cool. I think they're one of the neatest looking MRAPs they have.
That's cool.
I mean, that's cool, bro.
All that
that's
stuff
sick.
around it, to be honest with you, kind of looks a little silly, but they're probably cool without the, like, rails around it.
Dude, I thought that's what made them look cool.
Yeah, it kind of makes it look like a big old junk heap going down the road a little bit.
Dude, you know what this thing makes it look like? It looks like this thing is set up to drive through Belfast as you hear "Come out, you blacks and tans" playing from the windows. It looks like this thing is set up for that. But anyways, I guess the difference of opinion there. We'll leave this up to the audience. Is this a good-looking vehicle or is this a not good-looking vehicle? I think it looks great. Matthew thinks it kind of looks a little dorky with the cage. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the British-supplied Mastiffs on patrol on that country road, Take Me Home. And we're now going to be moving on into Luhansk, because some of y'all didn't come here for the news. Some of y'all came here to see things blow up. And we saw something blow up in Luhansk, which was a massive ammunition depot. And so let me get y'all to our first clip of this. We have 2 of them. And here's the first clip. Look at that. Holy moly. You hear the ammo popping and crackling out there like some kind of a sick and twisted Rice Krispies. And we have another video of this as well. Listen to this one. Man, look at that. And then the light fades as the next explosion gets ready. And so that's the end of that little clip right there. But, of course, nice to see another ammunition dump go up in flames. And now we're going to be moving on from Luhansk now and on towards Marinka, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a BM-21 Grad. I'm sure the Russians were not very grad about this one, as the dubstep intensifies. Hit it, Matthew! But
Man, this is t.me/bratpp.
What the hell is that? What the hell is that? But we could see the artillery shell hit the Grad, and we now see the Grad having a little bit of a misfire. Several misfires, as a matter of fact. And Doughboy said, "Oh my." And I'd have to say that as well. Oh my. Oh man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. I try and do voice impersonations. Nobody likes them. Oh man, I'm telling you. Nobody asks for them anymore. Nobody wants the smooth sound of Sam Elliott. Or anything else for that matter. Hell, nobody wants to hear anything anymore. It's kind of sad. But anyways, moving on from Marinka. That was the only news we got from the Donetsk front. But we did get some very interesting information down in this part of the front line. Some of y'all may not know this, but this part of the front line is fairly interesting. I'll show y'all. So moving on down here, on into this area here, and you see the village of Novodonetsk, which still is under Russian control. Right here. Let me actually adjust this front line. Well, actually, I'll be readjusting it. Well, actually, I'll just adjust it to what it is today. So, this is kind of what the Ukrainian line looks like right now, from our best understanding. I'll be moving that right there because that's about what that looks like, and we're good to go. So, the Russians control Novodonetsk. A Ukrainian breakthrough today on the Vremivsky Ridge in this area was able to push past the village chain and towards Kremenchuk. And from what we understand right now, the Ukrainians may have taken Kremenchuk. That was not updated on Deep State UA. We did not see that today, but I did see multiple reports today confirming that the Ukrainians had in fact moved beyond Novodonetsk, and they're attempting to encircle the Russians in this area. This is going to be forcing the Russians out of Novodonetsk, and we probably won't see them there again for a good while, because the Ukrainians are probably not going to let them come back. So that is one big frontline development we heard today. We didn't see that on Deep State UA, but I'm not going to blame them because everyone's trying the best they can, and the guys at at Deep State are two brothers that are working on this map, from what I understand. They're just like Matthew and me, so I understand if they get a thing wrong here or there, because we also get a thing wrong here or there. But moving on into the clips we got today, which was near Pravutne, we saw that they were hitting that good drone bombing today, that good. Let me show. I'm turning into a caveman here. Why say more word when less word do trick? Alright, we're going to be muting that. Danny said, we need more New York talk. Oh, get the hell out of here. Well, you see the Russians hiding in the little foxhole down there. More so a crater shell. A crater hole, more so. Sorry. And the drone is just picking them out. Easy targets. But you see they found a group of them here in this crater. Just kind of wandering around doing their thing. And there goes the F1 grenade.
Oh, dear.
Ooh.
Oh, he didn't move fast enough.
Oh, my. He did not move quick enough. So very nice to see. They got some more of them. Moving on out of this area of the front, and further on down and into the area of Huilopol, we also heard that there were no more available reserves in this area, which is once again pretty nice development. Russian forces likely lack combat-ready reserves, which is what the Institute for the Study of War stated. The failure to conduct any rotations will likely result in a quicker rate of degradation for Russian formations defending against Ukrainian counteroffensives in southern Ukraine. And we covered that a little bit earlier, but I wanted to make sure y'all got that again, because that was about the southern front in particular. Moving on into the area of Mala-Tokmachka, we also saw some pictures of a Leopard 2 on the southern front. Take a look. They're posing in front of their Leopard 2. It appears to be a Leopard 2 A6. We can see them taking a picture on top of their Leopard 2 A6. We can then see them taking another picture of the Leopard 2 A6. And even another one, as they all stand on the turret, with the turret turned backwards, facing over the engine bay. A pretty cool tank all around, and a pretty cool series of pictures to have. We're now going to be moving on from that and on into the area of Mirne near Pyatsky-Katki, where we saw a Russian taking a drink from a stagnant puddle because they have no water. Alright. And then there's music for this as well.
What in the world is that music?
1970s shopping mall music, and we can see a Russian soldier drinking out of a stale puddle.
Damn, he might as well be shot already.
Man, he's going to die of some of the worst bacterial infections you ever seen. He's going to be a living petri dish here in a minute.
Probably a worse death than getting shot.
Yeah, he's going to be sitting there, oh, my stomach, it kind of hurts. And there's going to be like some kind of a rare animal, like a gecko that shoots out of his stomach. It's going to go scurrying off. It's going to turn into the Alien or the Predator or whatever the hell that movie was. But anyways.
Or try to sell car insurance on the spot.
You could save 15% or more on car insurance.
Yeah.
Just sprays them all down with a PKP. But anyways, that's the situation on the southern front today. Hopefully the Ukrainians are able to continue their large advances. And meanwhile in Kherson, we saw that the Ukrainians still hold the Dachki pocket and are pushing, blew up a Russian APC that then went out of control afterwards. Here's the clip. There's the APC. There it is being hit. You can see it now kind of going out of control and hitting a building. Out of the whole area it could have gone beyond the building that was wide open, it rams right into the building. I don't know why. I don't know what's up with the Russians and doing stuff like that, but they never cease to amaze me with that kind of garbage. And we now see the remaining Russians running off because the driver apparently is gone. But with that, And that is the end of that clip, and it's great to see that they're still holding that area and inflicting losses on the Russians. And with that, without further ado, it's time for us to get to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And so without further ado, here is the speech. Speech! And this is the same one from yesterday. And since we weren't able to cover the whole thing yesterday, we'll be playing more of it today. Yippee! So let me go to English real quick. Let me auto-generate the English. Come on, give me to the English. There we go.
Zelensky knew he gave enough content for 2 days.
Yes, he said, I have given them enough for 2 days. They need to make it work. And we're going to make it work. We're going to make it happen. And so, getting back to the part of the speech we were at yesterday.
Свободі народів не було загроз. І це дуже важливо. І так само, як люди на вулицях і площах у єдності можуть повалити будь-яку диктатуру. Об'єднаний світ здатен знешкодити будь-якого агресора, будь-яку загрозу глобальній свободі. Але для цього треба діяти на захист свободи і всім разом. І Аргентині, і всій Латинській Америці, усьому світу. Усьому. Віва ла лібертат! Я дякую за увагу. Слава Україні!
And that's the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. Believe it or not. So we were already pretty much at the end of it yesterday. If we had just gone on 30 more seconds, we would have reached the end. And funnily enough, everyone, y'all aren't going to believe this. We have reached the end of President Zelensky's speech, and now it's time for us to move on into something fairly pressing. The questions and the polls. Many of y'all have been asked leading questions in between the last question segment and this one, and I want to hear what y'all have been thinking about, some of the top questions of the day. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our final question segment of the night, we have our first poll, which says Ukraine has expressed concerns about former U.S. officials meeting in secret with Russia, and what are your thoughts? 61% said it's an understandable concern, 18% said it shouldn't be allowed to continue, 13% said no need for concern, it's okay, and 9% said unsure. And I have confirmed for a fact now that this group of former U.S. officials are not sanctioned, and they are apparently a bunch of old guys who are kind of arrogant, running around representing the U.S. on their own behalf. So, to me, I think it should not be allowed to continue, and I understand why Ukraine's concerned, and I think the U.S. should be also concerned by that as well, because I think everything should be sanctioned that's done with our foreign policy. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I don't agree with that at all. I do consider that to be a little concerning, but considering they're not representing the U.S. in any official capacity, there's really nothing the United States can do, and it's not like they're going to be enforcing anything that the United States does. Like, what are these people going to do? Go over there and say, we represent the U.S. We're going to give over the U.S. to you for free. And the Russians go, okay. And then these guys go, okay, America, go ahead and do it. No, we just say, screw off. Who the hell are you people? That's what we would tell them. So that's a little concerning, but it's not that big of a deal to me because they have no enforceable power and they're not even representing the U.S. officially, or at all for that matter. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says, today Zelensky met with Erdogan, who fully backed Ukraine with NATO membership, and what are your thoughts? 50% said that's great, Erdogan is an ally, 27% said it sounds like a political move, 14% said that's meaningless right now, and 9% said unsure. And I gotta say, I'm kind of shocked by that. Erdogan has backed Ukraine with NATO membership, although to me, it's kind of pointless because I think Erdogan knows as well it's impossible to let Ukraine into NATO right now while they're at war. So I think it's mainly a political move. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's mostly a political move, most likely. Like you said, obviously they're not going to be getting into NATO anytime soon. But it is great to hear that those kinds of sentiments are coming out of the West, well, out of NATO at all. And fairly interesting to hear from someone that, you know, people weren't really a big fan of recently. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our third poll says Zelensky again stated that F-16 training is far behind schedule, and has this promise been broken? It looks like 45% said no, it's too early for that conclusion. 32% said yes, the West has failed Ukraine. 13% said unsure, and 10% said it looks like they might. And I would say it's probably too early for that conclusion. While it's disappointing to see that the West has fallen behind on their training schedule, as Zelensky's noted several times now, I think they will finally catch up on it, and they'll probably get the jets there, probably not in the time that Ukraine wants them to get there, but they'll get there eventually. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think it's largely going to plan and largely going to schedule. It was, of course, was a long and drawn out schedule from the start, but they eventually will make it there. I still think, however, that we should be trying to speed up that process as best as we can and get them there within the next month or two at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can from what I know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we are once again fresh out of polls. So we're moving back into no cap. We're back into our super chat questions. And up first, excuse me, we have a $10 super chat from ABCD. And thank you very much for that support. And they said, so good you are feeling better. And I got to say, somewhat, I'm regressing slightly, but they said, did the Ukrainians retake the chicken tender?
They have not, unfortunately. The chicken tender still lies, from what we understand, a good ways behind the lines at this point. I would say maybe a mile or a mile and a half. It's about right back here, right where this little forested area is. So unfortunately, they have not retaken the chicken tender yet. But hopefully they will. Hopefully we'll see that probably within this year. And that would be cool if we did. Because that thing became famous, the chicken tender did, especially on this channel, because everyone was like, oh my god, why does he keep talking about the chicken tender? And that's because it was the most important defensive position in the northeast of the city. But with that, thank you so much, ABCD, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this channel possible. You help us to keep the lights on. You help us to support the coffee fund, the pizza fund, and the million other funds that we have. And I got to thank you so much, because without the supports of those funds, we wouldn't be able to do this. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, shout out to Ari Soinini. Sorry for butchering that last name, by the way. And they put in an $8 super chat without a comment, as well as Kieran Whitfield put in a 5, Dupper Bob put in a 2, and Philip put in a 1. And sadly, no comments to address on any of those. But thank you all very much for that support and helping to keep us running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you all so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but the support does help us to keep supporting those coffee funds, pizza funds, lighting funds. What else? What other funds? The oil change fund, the
Ricola fund,
the chicken wing fund, the Ricola fund, the flu fund, every kind of fund we have. Oh man, I'm telling you. And I gotta thank y'all so much for the support, because if it wasn't for folks that supported this channel and helped this thing to keep on rolling, it wouldn't be possible for us to keep this thing going. And so thank you so much once again to all of y'all. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a 5, and thank you, Dark Warrior, for that support. They said, I'm kind of wondering what Zelensky is planning if he joins NATO mid-war. If he isn't planning to invoke Article 5, wouldn't he be more patient?
That's kind of what everyone's been thinking, is that he's wanting to join NATO in the war, so that way Article 5 could be invoked and the war could end that way. But that kind of goes against the grain. We've kind of been trying to avoid a mass-scale war with Russia, and that's also why we're not really letting Ukraine in. However, Article 5 doesn't dictate that we have to have an armed response to the invocation of Article 5. It's just whatever NATO finds appropriate. And so he could invoke Article 5, and then we just find it appropriate to throw in another sanction again, or something similar. So that could also be the case. And so, with that, I hope that does address that best I can, and thank you so much once again for the support and help this channel to keep on running. Dark Warrior, you have been around forever, certainly an old guard, and I got to thank you so much once again, because folks like you make this channel possible and help it to keep on going. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5 and says, take a live chat. And we sure will, CK Bold, and thank you for always putting in that consistent $5 support. And the live chat question is going to go to Pops, who says, how long do you feel this war will last, and why?
I have a feel. Of course, I have to say this. I haven't said this in a long time, and I finally get to say it again. Yippee! I don't really like crystal balling much, and that's a little bit of a crystal ball thing, because predictions of the future are never right. That's one thing that I've seen before I even did YouTube, and that's one thing I've certainly seen whenever I've tried to make a prediction, is that they've always ended up being wrong. I actually predicted last year that the war would end by this point, and it's still going on fairly strong even right now. So, with that in mind, you know, this could go on for a while. This could go on for a good while longer. I would estimate that it's probably going to be about another year, maybe even a little bit longer than that, but who really knows? And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again, CK Bull, for sponsoring that live chat question, because that was a very interesting one. But that would be my guesstimate, around a year, maybe a year and a half from this point. And so with that, We are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Victor Luna, who puts in a 5 and says, will Ukraine use its airborne forces behind Russian lines like in World War II?
Probably not. In World War II, you could possibly do something like that because air defenses weren't as modern and as advanced as they are now. But to drop off airborne soldiers in a parajump, an aircraft has to be several thousand feet up, which means that it gets lit up like a Christmas tree on radar, and any surface-to-air missile defense system in the area, and the Russians probably do have a somewhat consistent air defense net behind their lines, could end up shooting down those aircraft before the soldiers ever even jump, before they ever even made it over the lines itself. So I have a feeling they probably wouldn't be doing anything like that. We also saw that the Russians' attempt at doing that at the beginning of the war at a hospital airport ended abysmally, with most of the VDV force there being destroyed before Russian reinforcements arrived, and they never really were able to secure the airfield. So I would assume they probably wouldn't do anything like that, mostly because the strategy just doesn't really work anymore in the modern day, and if it did, it would be a very rare situation that would be a once-in-a-century kind of ordeal. But with that, thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ignis, Lord of Flame, who puts in a 5 and says, why haven't we seen Challenger 2 tanks on the front lines yet? I haven't seen any personally.
We have seen them down there. I don't know why we haven't seen them in action yet. Maybe the Ukrainians are holding those into reserve, or having them in a reserve unit. I'm not particularly sure, because we have seen pictures of them at the front, but we haven't seen any pictures of them in use. And honestly, the reason for that is kind of unknown at the moment. But with that, thank you so much for the support, and I hope that addresses that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Neil Vizanot, and thank you very much, Neil, for that support. He says, I never thought I'd actually be rooting for the Decepticons. Is that a what's that movie called? Reference?
Transformers?
Transformers? Yeah, Transformers.
Yeah, that is a Transformers reference. And I can't believe anyone's rooting for the Decepticons either. You must be pure evil. I'm just kidding. I don't really know a lot about Transformers. I just know about the Decepticons. But still, thank you so much for the support. And it is crazy to think that people are rooting for the Decepticons. It is kind of crazy when you think about it. But that's the world we live in nowadays, is that people are rooting for them, and root they shall. And so with that, thank you for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Chef Pat, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Chef Pat, for that support. And he says, happy Friday, Enforcer and Matt. Since seeing one of the streams, you showed your faces. I can't figure out if you guys are great value versions of my brothers, or if my brothers are great value versions of you guys.
Well, thank you for the support, Chef Pat. And we're probably great value versions of your brothers, to be honest with you. But that's pretty weird that we look a lot. I've heard that a lot, though. I hear a lot from people that we look a lot like people they know or their family, which is always weird because it's like, I don't even know you people. I don't even know your family or anything. But still, I've got to thank you for the support, Chef Pat, and helping this channel to keep on running. And that's weird. I don't really know how to respond to that rather than we get that a good deal. Because I'm like, I don't really know where to go with that one, to be honest. I'm losing it. But still, thank you so much for the support, Chef Pat, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this thing possible. If it wasn't for people who supported this channel, we wouldn't be able to run this thing. We have to eat. We have to have coffee. We have to have pizza. There has to be funds for that stuff. And folks like you, Chef Pat, since you're a chef, you're most likely putting that towards the pizza fund, I would assume. Who knows? Maybe you're putting it towards the Morse code fund or something similar, or the flu fund, or the Ricola fund. Who knows? But still, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, what's the difference between Putler and Hitler? Hitler knew when to off himself. And question to the chat.
And a very good point. A very good point. Hitler did know that. You see, the Soviets were only, I think, 500 meters from the Führer bunker when he blew his head off. Funnily enough, interesting thing y'all may not know, the pistol he used was a Walther PPK. And if y'all have never seen one of those before, I'll show it to you. A Walther PPK. This one right here. This is the design of pistol that was used. It's a direct blowback pistol, by the way. It's a really interesting design. But anyways, moving on from that, he let her rip. And interestingly enough, y'all, this is a little crazy. When a pistol caliber bullet, in his, the top of your head, it actually doesn't exit most of the time. It just rides the ridge, inside of your skull. And I actually didn't know that until I watched someone talk about that on some kind of a video. It was like how to survive a headshot or something, and they talked about how that worked. And I was like, that is really bizarre, and I don't like that. But I'm now going to impart that information to y'all and let y'all carry that information for the rest of y'all's lives. So that's what happened. So, all of the illustrations, well, not the illustrations, all of the movies where you see Hitler off himself and there's blood all over the wall and everything, that actually didn't happen. The bullet never exited. So that was a weird thing that I found out. But anyways, moving on from that, I have to say that is true. Putin should know when the right time is, and the right time is now. The best time is today. Why wait for tomorrow? What you can do today. I think someone needs to start putting out those quotes of inspiration to Putin on his Instagram. But still, with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Blue Flam, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you make it possible for us to eat and possible for us to sleep. And so with that, let us get a live chat.
And the live chat question goes to, let's see here, goes to Private Public 77, who says, was the Challenger 2 spotted at the front today?
No, I don't think so. We've seen pictures of it near the front, behind the lines, but we've never seen one in action firing on the front line. So, unfortunately, have not seen that today or yet, but we probably eventually will see that as I have my watch on the bottom of my desk. And so with that,
okay.
Hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again, Blue Flam, for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dimos Z, who puts in a 5 and says Prigozhin is the Star Scream to Putin's Megatron.
I don't know what Star Scream is. I don't know what that is. Let me go pull it up on a side screen. Star Scream. So this is it. Hang on, let me look around at this thing. That's pretty interesting. So this is what it is. That's it.
That's it.
I don't know anything about the Transformers, to be completely honest with you. I will agree with you just by default, because I have a feeling you know a lot more about the Transformers than I do. So yes, I would agree, but I've never heard or seen of this thing before. But with that, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And our next one goes to BC Skyman, who puts in a 4 and sadly does not leave a comment. But thank you, BC, very much for that support as always and helping to keep the channel running. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Marcus Kennedy. And thank you very much, Marcus, for that support. And he says, glad Enforcement Matt is feeling better. And thank you very much, Marcus. Sadly, I am not feeling as good as I thought I was feeling, and I found that out right after the stream started. So it looks like this is going to be a little bit of a drawn-out illness. I'm just going to be straight up and honest. I was hoping maybe I could just work through it, but it looks like it's going to be a little tougher than I thought. So that's why I've been awfully quiet tonight. Hopefully, I feel better soon. I have a feeling Monday is going to be the date that I start feeling actually better again. So we'll have to wait and see. But thank you for at least for the good thoughts. Well, my brain goes totally empty there, but thank you very much. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from James Dunn, who says, what fuel types does Russia tank use and freeze at?
The Russian tanks use diesel, and the freezing temperature of a diesel. They say, what temperature is diesel freeze? It's right at 32 degrees. How long does it take diesel to freeze? 48 to 72 hours. What is too cool for a diesel engine? The problem is that diesel gels at low temperatures, below about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Certain hydrocarbons in diesel turn gelatinous. What else do we have? It's right at the freezing mark, 32 degrees. The fuel can begin to cloud at temperatures as high as 32 degrees. At 34 degrees, you begin to see the gelling process. Once the weather is close to 10 to 15 degrees. Okay, that's actually pretty off from the rest of them. Diesel fuel has the potential to occur when gelling occurs and when the temperature drops below 32 degrees. Let's see, very cold temperatures below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, you're experiencing issues, blah, blah, blah. Diesel fuel can freeze in temperatures below 32 degrees. If the temperature continue below 15 degrees, the fuel will what? Let's see. When the kerosene components start to stiffen. Complete solidification doesn't usually occur until the temperature drops below 15 degrees. So 32 degrees, it starts to gel, kind of like some nice hair gel. At 15 degrees, it's frozen. Now, let's ask that about jet fuel. Freezing temperature of jet fuel. I spelled temperature wrong. Let's see here. Negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So you get a whole extra 72 degrees of temperature before jet fuel begins to freeze. So that is kind of the big difference in between an Abrams and a T-72, or any Russian tank for that matter, is that they can end up freezing. Now, the big question, though, is that Russian tanks can also run on kerosene, and we need to pull up the freezing point of kerosene. So, kerosene, freezing point. So, kerosene actually has a freezing point at negative 40 degrees Celsius, or negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That translation does not work. Let's see here. So kerosene actually would be your best bet for having something not freeze over in the winter, because if negative 40 degrees Celsius is correct, you're going to have to get in some pretty cold temperatures and some very cold conditions for kerosene to ever freeze. But jet fuel and kerosene can be used in cold weather environments. And as far as the Leopard 2 goes, and let's pull up the Leopard 2. Leopard 2 A6, and let's go find the engine that the Leopard 2 has. So, we want to find the engine, yes? Liquid cooled V12. We want to find the MTU. That is the Friedrichshafen, the manufacturer, whatever the hell that is. But anyways, let's type this in. Well, it's probably going to talk about the engine here, won't it? Let's see here. Series production, further improvements, replacement, protection, secondary protection, armor upgrades, armament. What about the propulsion? Leopard 2 is propelled. It provides 1500 PS, 2600 RPM. The torque, yada yada. Well, what about the fuel? So Leopard 2 has a 1,160 liter fuel tank. Well, 4 of them, and they all give about 1,200 liters of fuel to the tank. And top speed, a power pack engine. Let's see. Has a torsion bar suspension. It doesn't say anything about the different kinds of fuel it can use, but there is a picture of the engine outside of the tank. So it's a bit of a whopper. A V12 is a pretty big one. But not really seeing a lot about the fuels. What fuels can a Leopard 2... What fuels does a Leopard tank use? Leopard 2 is diesel powered, not driven by jet fuel that powers the Abrams. It's easier to operate. Well, yeah, but how much fuel? So it doesn't really seem like there's many different kinds of fuel. So it can operate on gasoline or diesel. So what is the freezing point of gasoline? Freezing point of gasoline. Dang. Okay, so gasoline actually does not freeze for a very long time. It has to get down to a negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit for gasoline to freeze. So that is pretty wild. I actually thought that diesel was a little bit more of a robust fuel than anything, but apparently gas can last a long while. The Leopard 2 can hypothetically use gas from what we saw. So there we have it. There's all of the temperature breakdowns of all the freezing points of all the different kinds of fuels that can be used in these tanks. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from BC Skyman. This time he throws in a $20 donation, and sadly no comment once again, but thank you, BC, so much for the second support of the night. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman, and looking out for this channel and helping to support us and keep it running. And also good night, by the way, because I saw that BC Skyman was just getting off right now. But before you get off, hopefully you're still here. I want to thank you so much, BC Skyman, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it going, because it is the only way we make this channel possible is through folks supporting us and helping us to keep it going. And and we can see, that sometimes folks support us a good deal, sometimes folks don't support us much, but we can always count on folks like you, BC Skyman, to help us to keep this channel running. And I gotta thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep rolling, because folks like you make it possible for us to be able to come on here day in and day out and keep this thing going. And so thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Evans Alter, who puts in a 2 and says, have you heard about the rumors that a Prigozhin coup 2.0 might be coming?
I have not. I've heard that he's still in Russia, but I haven't heard about coup 2.0 coming around, because I don't think anyone would follow him again, considering how unpredictable the first coup was and how quickly it ended. But with that, thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $1 super chat once again from Chef Pat, who says, I don't look like you guys. I have milkman syndrome.
I don't know what that means.
Me neither.
let me type that in. Milkman syndrome. Let's see. I don't know what this is. I don't know. I have no idea. But still, thank you for the support. And that is pretty interesting to hear, but I don't know where to go with it, because I don't know what Milkman Syndrome is. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of super chats now, so we are moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream, which are Mark Hodges, C-Fay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Bernew, and Paul Schultz. They said this evening's Morse says, Russia is waiting for their lines to break. Glory to Ukraine, and long live the LSA. Excuse me, the LSA.
That's the sound of money, and y'all just got that right on the nail. And I got to thank you so much for y'all getting that Morse code message correct again, because y'all been doing that for nearly 500 days now, and it's unbelievable to think y'all been getting that correct every single time. And so with that, thank y'all so much once again for doing that. That is really cool, and y'all got the message correct. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our first question from the live chat goes to Guamson Cruz, who says, didn't Russia use cluster bombs in both Bakhmut and against the Azov?
I believe they did. I believe you would be correct with that. And so I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Alabama Cajun, who says, am I the only one that is waiting for the predictor drone that can shoot down the orc drones?
I don't know what those would be, but maybe. You may be the only one, because I've never heard of a predictor drone. But with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ray, who says, can the drone direct fire to a target that it's locked in on?
Yes, I believe it can. I believe it actually provides coordinates and everything else involved. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Trister1, who says, how can you have 180,000 combat troops and a slice of Ukraine with no strategic reserves available?
Wait a minute, can you reread that one again?
How can you have 180,000 combat troops and a slice of Ukraine with no strategic reserves available?
I'm sorry, I'm not really understanding that question. Could you decipher that one for me, Matthew?
Let's see. I'll be honest with you, my brain's not working.
Unfortunately, I think we'll have to circle back to that one, because I'm not understanding the way that question is worded, unfortunately. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Gabriel Mum, who says, to what extent do you think it is a problem that Russia captured NATO equipment in Ukraine and gives that to other countries for study, like Iran and China?
Probably, it's fairly high, because the Chinese are really the only country that has facilities to do anything with the tech. The Russians don't. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is that they're probably sending all of it to China instead of keeping it for themselves. But with that, we're also going to be rounding out the stream here fairly soon, probably within the next few minutes, probably by 11:10 local time, 12:10 Eastern time, because Matthew isn't doing that well, and I want to make sure we don't stay on for too long so that we can, go ahead and get off the air. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to 1919 Hardwood, who says, didn't Ukraine originally ask for cluster munitions to disassemble the clusters for economical drone bomblets? Excuse me. I'm falling apart. Sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. I don't I don't think I remember hearing about that, so unfortunately I have to declare ignorance on that one. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to White Wolf, who says, what would happen to Ukraine NATO invitation if they lost the war?
Well, they probably wouldn't exist at that point if they lost the war for a NATO invitation to exist at all, so it would probably just disappear. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ronald Schmidt, who says, what is the status of Sweden's attempt to join NATO?
It appears that it's finally getting approval from Turkey, from what I understood last time, but I haven't heard any official developments about the actual process of NATO membership happening with Sweden at the moment. But from what I understand, it all has green lights. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Paul, who says, what's to say Ukraine would be running the Abrams on jet fuel and not diesel, since it is a multi-fuel engine?
The reason why it most likely run on jet fuel is because it can run in colder temperatures than diesel. Diesel starts to coagulate around 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's most likely the reason why they would run it on jet fuels, because it can actually operate in cold weather conditions regardless. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And it looks like we have a super chat. This one is from Neil Vizanot, once again, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Neil, for that support. He says, I tried to put in a super chat explaining Starscream character, but YouTube won't let me for some reason. Sorry. Also, keep up the good work, and I hope Matt feels better soon. And thank you, Neil. I do hope I get feeling better soon. This one feels like it's dragging out worse than any virus or anything I've ever had. It's like it won't go away, but thank you.
And thank you for the support, Neil, while I can't swallow. That's something interesting, by the way. I'll share that with you all real quick. Just a quick little side note. As I've continued to do the stream more and more and talked more and more, and my voice has gotten hoarse sometimes, and I've never really had time for it to recover, it has become harder for me to swallow sometimes, and it actually takes a lot of effort sometimes for me to be able to do that. But anyways, moving on from that, thank you for attempting to explain what the Starscream character is, but for some reason, YouTube is being YouTube tonight as usual. Regardless, thank you so much for appreciating the work we do, and hopefully Matt will feel better soon. He's not feeling that great right now, and he's getting worse from what I can tell, but hopefully he will be back at it and much better off than he is right now. And thank you so much, Neil, for supporting the channel and helping this thing to keep running, because of course, I cannot stress this enough, people like you make this channel possible, and I gotta thank you so much for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, this channel would not be possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and I think this is going to be our last one of the night. So, Enforcer, would you like to do the whole spill?
All right, so we are on to the final question of the night. So, who is the lucky last person to put in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Chewbacca's secret love child, who says, any news on the crazy plot to blow up the power plant, and when you have the Russian mafia in control of a country, anything is possible.
That's actually fairly interesting. Budanov actually came out today and said that the threat of the nuclear power plant blowing up is dissipating, which kind of aggravated. I'm going to be on. I'll be completely unfiltered here. That actually aggravated me a lot, because usually whenever nuclear power plant hype came out throughout the entire war, we didn't really pay much attention to it because it was really just hype. And then they hyped this one up unbelievably, and we sat there and just went with exactly what Budanov was saying. And now Budanov is going to go and just say, hey, it's no big deal now. And it's like, what the hell? That was a big deal for a week and a half, 2 weeks, according to you, and now it's just not. That was kind of annoying to us, but from what we're hearing, it's now no longer that big of an issue, and it's just disappearing magically now. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for coming on and watching tonight. There are still 4,800 of y'all on right now, and I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to subscribe. We run these streams 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single day of the week, unless if Matthew gets sick, because it's entirely possible that we may not be running a stream tomorrow if Matthew's not doing that well, because it really takes both of us to run this thing. We'll have to see, so I'm just going to let you all know that in advance. I don't know if a stream will be running tomorrow. Hopefully one will. Just kind of like check your phones or your computers at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and check. We may be running, we may not be running. We'll also put out a community announcement tomorrow if it isn't running. But still, thank you all so much once again for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
and Slava Ukraine.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.